And good evening on Tuesday night, the 10th of March. Always like to pause there. That's always fun. The Ochelli Effect on UCY.TV radio. That is at UCY.TV/TOE. Thank you for tuning in. If you've come to the website, if you're using your fondle slab of choice to utilize whatever little application you might choose from the store or whatever, or even if you're on an Apple device, I still welcome you. The world of slavery as it is. Anyway, kind of burnt out, kind of in a strange mood tonight, but it is Tuesday, so we know it's going to be of interest at the very least because, after all, we'll have Roger Landry on in just a moment. And I want to thank you guys, like I said, for tuning in, for bothering to check out things further down the line. I always forget to mention this on YouTube, or if you're picking it up through the MP3, which you can get at the aforementioned site that I already blurted out. Anyway, I'm still liking the new intro, but it kind of ends a little abruptly. Don't know what you guys think of it. Still gotten some feedback on it, but I'm liking it, so there it is. Anyway, Roger Landry, the founder and main ranter over at the Liberty Beacon, that is the Liberty Beacon, all one word.com. And man, oh man, is this thing not going to cooperate? Let's see. Let's see if it works. Hopefully, that'll be Roger on his way in while I'm trying to line things up. In the second hour tonight, though, we'll have Ariana Love on to discuss many a thing Middle Eastern in nature. Definitely, I want to talk a little Palestine, and of course, I'll let her explain herself to you, who she is, where she comes from. She is also connected to the Liberty Beacon as well, and we're going to discuss one of those websites I keep bringing up that they are working on over there, that everybody's working on. Big collection of very interesting, fascinating, and important information from the Liberty Beacon. So, Roger, I do hear you, and and I see your ceiling. Oops, he muted there for a second. Let's see what happens.
I'm here.
There we go, okay. I thought it was going to be a strange night. Anyway.
No, I hit the mute button instead of the camera button. But to further a little bit of information on Ariana Love, she is not only part of the Liberty Beacon Project. Ariana is my executive assistant. She's the person who keeps me pointed down the middle of the path instead of straying off in this direction or that. There's so much crap going on in my life every single day that without an extremely intelligent individual like Ariana, I would probably be stumbling a lot.
And you know what? She has to be something of interest and very intelligent to be able to begin to handle the complexity of what goes on with you.
Oh God. Yeah, we won't even go there because there goes the whole show.
Yeah, I know. But I'm just saying, it's not like you're just kissing up to her because she does such good work for you. The fact is, it requires a special talent to be able to even begin to help you organize things
Well,
because there's so much happening.
one of the first things I ask her every day is, "Are you sorry yet?"
Nice, nice. And also, she's doing that Middle East Rising site, which I
Right.
am.
She will be the senior admin for the Middle East Rising. She will also have her own talk show. And those will all be pre recorded discussions like the Liberty Beacon special. And those will start going out within the next week to 10 days.
Yeah, and those are going to be shows that I am certainly going to be personally interested in. I don't have time to listen to every radio show that I would like to anymore, Roger. I got to be honest with you, because there's so many of them out there. But Ariana's show, I'm going to put on my list of things that I cannot miss. So, just
Well,
so everybody knows.
hopefully on the next hour, and I really don't want to bust things up too much, but she's going to be bringing an article and a show we did with a very high profile individual that is literally ground pounding, much like we're going to be doing on this show.
Well, right, we have something really remarkable. I'm having trouble pulling up the article, but I will have it in front of me in just a second. But this is this is kind of mind blowing, Roger. And I wonder if you want to kind of give a little preface before we even give the title as to what we're talking about, because we have mentioned this before on this show.
Yes, we have mentioned it. And part of the reason why an individual like this would come to the Liberty Beacon Project to put out a word that is actually shattering. Shattering to most people who have any faith left whatsoever in institutions like UNICEF or the World Health Organization or the UN in general. This will shatter what you believe and your faith in these organizations. And yeah, we've hit on it. And part of this story has been told by people and journalists who have accumulated facts from across the globe. We didn't do that. We went straight to one of the doctors who discovered this, did the research, and blew the whistle. And what this gentleman, and this is a African doctor from Kenya, what he is going to tell us, what he tells us in this show, and what I'm going to tell you secondhand via my conversations with him and this article, is the evil goes well beyond anything you've heard to date. And this was heard right from this gentleman's mouth on the Liberty Beacon special we recorded. So that's in the article that Chuck has put in the chat room. So read the article. It's up first. At the end of the article, you will find a 1 hour discussion with myself, Christina England, who is a very, very good big part of the Liberty Beacon Project, and Dr. Nagare, who is a Kenyan doctor. And would you like to segue right into that article at this point? Chuck?
Just getting the link into the chat room now, believe it or not. Everything's running like mud. So there
Okay.
we go, people, just so you know. Let's see now. Come on. There it goes. All right. I finally dropped it. Everybody will see that now. This is the article. This is what it's all about. And yes, this is some firsthand information. And of course, this is the best thing that you can do when you want to examine one of these stories is to find somebody who was involved directly in it firsthand. And here we go again with another whistleblower. And I think the more that we tell a guy's story like this, the more we protect him from the types of, blowback that do come to them in their chosen profession, socially, etc. So I'm more than happy to discuss this tonight and to tell this story. And we will tell this story multiple times and make sure that the word gets out. Of course, these international organizations, for decades now have been assumed to be, quite benevolent, quite, quite involved in, bettering the world for those less fortunate and so on and so forth. And, those of us who are kind of getting in on the game nowadays understand that a lot of them are there for different reasons. But here is why we say that, though.
Let me interject real quick here, because as a good follow-up, once you're done reading that article, I just published an article on the Liberty Beacon, and the title of that article is "Board Member of the World Health Organization is a Large Shareholder in Vaccine Company."
Yeah, of course, because those
And
of us who are
guess which vaccines the World Health Organization, the WHO, uses in a vast majority? Gee, would you think it would be the vaccines that are manufactured by this company, who one of their major shareholders sits on the World Health Organization board?
well, Roger, you mean to tell me that a guy sitting on one of these
It's a
international
woman. It's a
organization
lady.
boards? Oh, I'm
It's a
sorry.
lady. It's Annie Kelso,
Okay.
Professor Annie Kelso.
So, either way, you want to tell me that an individual who sits on a board of one of these international organizations actually also would be sitting on the board of an organization, a corporation that might actually benefit from the actions of an international organization? I mean, isn't that something they call conflict of interest, Roger? That
Well,
sounds really strange, doesn't
one
it?
of one of the one three of the largest three of the most proliferated vaccines on the planet are the flu vaccine, Gardasil, which is the HPV vaccine, and the MMR vaccine. Well, it just so happens that the company she owns a lot of stock in, CLS Limited, produces Gardasil, Fluvax, and MMR2.
Oh. So the fact that the human papillomavirus vaccine happened to move up in priority just might be one of those other coincidences. I'm sorry.
Ah, come
No,
on.
that's I'm saying we're just having a tinfoil hat discussion real quick here.
I wrote an article the other day called, and I almost did that one today, but I think this one needs more priority. We might do this one next week.
Mm.
I wrote an article called "Should There Be a Vaccine for the Disease Called Coincidence?"
Nice, nice. I'll take that. And you know what? You need to make sure you. I don't know if you have it in there because I didn't see the article, but please make sure to include the note about the the recent discussions over the anti. You ready for this one, right? The anti-autism vaccine.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
going to do a
okay,
whole.
okay.
I'm going to do a whole show on that alone.
Good, good. Okay.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
sorry. As usual, I sidetrack things. This
Oh, no,
is
no, 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 no! You did good, because let's stop and think about that for 1 second, okay? You got my mind on a path. You can't just jump me off that path right now.
okay.
All right, we meaning those of us in the know, those of us who have done the research, including people like Dr. Carly, Christina England, and I could go on and on, who have done massive research on vaccines, can prove unequivocally through scientific peer-reviewed studies that autism is triggered by, that autism is caused by. One of the major causes is vaccines.
Right.
Now, so we're going to tell you that your child got autism by getting a vaccine. So we're going to give you a vaccine against a vaccine that just crippled your child for life. Where the hell does the logic come in?
Exactly. Exactly. But hey, we're going to talk about a little lack of logic here too, aren't we?
Oh, yes, we are.
So
This,
I'm gonna give you guys the title. I've already dropped the link into the chat room. It took me a few minutes. Sorry about that, guys. But things run like mud on me occasionally. But the actual title is okay. Now his name is Nagare, right?
Nagari.
Nagare. See, I always do that. That's why I hesitate on people's names. Sorry, but Dr. Nagare exposes WHO in capital letters, ampersand, UNICEF, Tyranny, and Developing World to
On the development.
TLB.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, right, on Developing World to TLB in an exclusive must-hear interview. Okay.
All right. Now, we also, again, thanks to Christina England, who is an extremely big part of the Liberty Beacon Project, she wrote an article to preface this show. And we might not read all of it, but there's some points that I really, really want to hit on this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And let's start off with her opening. It has been known for many years that the World Health Organization, the WHO, is one of the most corrupt organizations on the planet, that they have been committing crimes against humanity for decades. What I'm going to describe to you now in my opinion, one of the most wicked acts to date. I am going to demonstrate through evidence given to the Liberty Beacon in an interview just how far this organization is prepared to go to cover up the truth, mislead the public, and cause deliberate harm to millions of vulnerable girls and women in the developing world. So let's start out with a little bit of background. In October 2014, reports from Kenya Catholic Doctors Association sent shockwaves around the world. The report stated that 2 to 3 million girls and women of childbearing age in Kenya had been vaccinated with tetanus vaccinations containing the anti-fertility hormone HCG, rendering them infertile. The information was discovered after the vaccines being used in the campaign were sent for testing and came back positive for containing the HCG hormone or HCG hormone. To find out more, and then there's a link for you guys to go to. Okay, who put tetanus vaccinations under police guard to avoid testing? Never before have you seen vaccines under armed guard. The reason it was done. Okay. Interested to learn the truth about how the Kenya Catholic Doctors Association became suspicious of what they discovered, I decided to contact obstetrician and gynecologist Dr. Wahomi uh, um, Nagari. All right. I'm choking on my own saliva here. Um,
No,
all right.
it's okay because and I know why you are too. Because normally you go very smoothly through this, no problem. You can barrel right through
But
it.
I've written it.
But
This one I haven't written.
right, I was going to
But
say
I've read it enough times that we're not going to have too many bumps in the road.
no.
So here we go. Dr. Nagari is a member of the Kenya Catholic Doctors Association and the Kenya Christian Professionals Forum. He was one of the 6 representatives of the Catholic Church in the Joint Committee of Experts drawn from the Catholic Church and the Ministry of Health appointed to test the tetanus vaccine in Kenya. On behalf of the Liberty Beacon Project, and this of course is Christina talking, I asked Dr. Nagari a series of questions. His answers along with documented evidence. Again, we don't challenge you to prove us wrong. We dare you to prove us wrong. So let me go over that again. I asked Dr. Nagari a series of questions. His answers, along with documented evidence that he has supplied, tell of a barbaric series of events that prove just how corrupt the WHO really is. Note, I have highlighted certain sections of Dr. Nagari's replies that I believe are of extreme importance. I will put the emphasis on them. I asked, again, Christina stating, I asked, what made the Kenya Catholic Doctors Association suspicious that the tetanus vaccine contained the anti-fertility hormone HCG? Dr. Nagari replies, the Catholic Church, as the name suggests, has a footprint worldwide. When WHO conducted the first purported neonatal tetanus eradication vaccination campaign in South America using a fertility regulating vaccine, the population most affected were Catholics. The church has a strong institutional memory. In 1995, WHO came to Kenya through the Ministry of Health and offered to run a similar campaign. On the backdrop of what had happened in South America and the fact that the campaign details were identical, the Catholic Church in Kenya requested the Ministry of Health to have the vaccines tested before it was administered. The Ministry of Health agreed with the church and ordered for the vaccines to be tested before administration. Who opted? WHO opted to withdraw the vaccine and cancel the campaign instead of submitting it for testing. Oh my God, that's not a look of guilt there, is it? You know,
Yeah.
we suspect you might be trying to force infertility drugs on our population against their knowledge and their consent. So we're asking you to test your vaccines before you put them out. And this was in 1995. And the WHO says, oh, never mind, never mind. We're not going to do it in Kenya. And they took their football and went home. So let's continue. In March of 2014, we heard of a neonatal tetanus campaign that was started in October the year before. All major health campaigns are usually widely advertised and launched with much pomp and color in the public. This particular campaign was very secretive, and a majority of Kenyans, including health personnel, do not know about it even today. And this was well over a year ago. This is what is causing the confusion with the church when the church states that the tetanus injection used in the vaccination campaign is unsafe, but the routine vaccine is safe. Again, massive confusion here. Most of these doctors in Kenya didn't even know these vaccines were being given out on a large scale. The bacterium that caused tetanus is found in soil. Multiple doses, 4 to 5, of tetanus vaccination confers immunity for a maximum of 10 years, after which a booster is needed to maintain immunity. Therefore, the only rational way of eradicating neonatal tetanus would be to ensure all pregnant women are given a minimum of 2 tetanus injections during the pregnancy. This protects the newborn child for the first 6 weeks of life before they are given the DPT shot.
Right.
A campaign that aims at random women aged 15 to 49, regardless of whether they are pregnant or not, run only in some areas of the country, would not eradicate neonatal tetanus. However, if the aim, and again this is emphasized, however, if the aim was to cause irreversible infertility and one used a fertility regulating vaccine disguised as a tetanus vaccine and claimed to be eradicating neonatal tetanus, one would be spot on. Spot on as in causing massive infertility across the countryside with nobody's knowledge. Okay, given the foregoing, when it became clear the Ministry of Health was going to have a second round of immunization campaigns in March of 2014, the Catholic Church met with the Minister of Health and the Director of Medical Services and requested for testing of the vaccine, just as it had been done in 1995. The Minister of Health at this point declined to have the vaccine tested, to the shock of the church. Reports from the field during the actual immunization exercise indicated that there was a special batch of vaccines that was under police guard that was not left under the custody of the vaccination center. This particular vaccine was highly controlled, okay, with those nurses administering it required to return each empty vial in exchange for a fresh vial. Further, at the end of the vaccination exercise, this particular batch was ferried away from the vaccination center back to Nairobi. Okay? Usually the extra vaccines after an immunization campaign are left at the participating centers and are used for routine immunizations. Why was this batch treated so special and under armed guard? He continues, given the foregoing, and you've got to remember he's from Africa, so his English is a little bit different than ours. So he says, given the foregoing, the Catholic Church acquired a single vial from the field during the March vaccination campaign and tested it for HCG using the ELISA methodology, and it tested positive.
Mm.
In 2014, the government launched a third immunization campaign and again refused the request of the Catholic Church to have the vaccine tested again. If Dr. Nagari is correct, and there is no reason to believe this honorable doctor, then this proves just how far this corrupt and totally inhumane organization is prepared to go in order to cover up the truth and avoid detection. We need to ask ourselves why the WHO would need to put this particular batch of vaccines under police guard and put such stringent constraints on it if they had nothing to hide, and why they were so opposed to having this vaccine tested at all. Shocked and sickened by this answer, and this is Christina, I'm reading her comment. Shocked and sickened by this answer, I asked, and again she's asking Dr. Nagari, when the Catholic Doctors Association sent the vaccinations for testing, what did you discover? Dr. Nagari replies, we used the ELISA method to test the vaccines and found them to be positive for HGC, or HCG, excuse me. The ELISA testing machines were calibrated for testing blood samples and not vaccines. For this reason, the results were disputed by the government. The Kenya Parliament then ordered the Church and Ministry of Health to form a joint committee of experts to retest this vaccine presented by the Church. I was a member of that committee, and we were advised to use high-performance liquid chromatography, HPLC, as it was the gold standard in vaccine testing. Even with this method, 3 of the 9 vials collected during the actual vaccination campaign tested positive for HGC. Some of the and this is what I know from the conversation I had with them. Some of the vials didn't contain enough liquid for proper testing, but 3 of the 9 did, and they tested positive. This conclusively proved that the vaccine used in the March and October 2014 purported tetanus eradication campaigns were actually disguised fertility regulating vaccines and not the ordinary tetanus vaccine. This is another paragraph that is under emphasis. This was administered to Kenyan women aged 15 to 49 years without their consent and has the potential for causing irreversible infertility. Dr. Nagari continues, this
Well,
is unethical.
Roger, 1 second, because I let's stop right there just for a moment. Let people take
Well,
that in.
let me
Oh,
read this last line, and then we can go to whatever you say, okay?
okay. Yeah.
His last comment is, Dr. Nagari's last comment is, and I really wanted to put this with emphasis with everything else, this is unethical and pure evil. I apologize. Go ahead, Chuck.
No, I see that is brutally obvious, but you know what is interesting here to me is that the immediate thing that I would be suspicious of, and let's just forget about whatever organizations are involved, however you might feel about the Catholic Church, whatever else. When you're making a request and you're watching something being controlled so stringently, the only reason for not even allowing the spent cartridges that they were using, okay, for these vaccines, the containers for each dose, they're making them return them before they can get new ones and everything else. They're controlling the numbers. They're not allowing anybody except the one authority to have an eye on any of the distribution, the reality of it. They're trying to keep the sample from falling into anybody's hands so that what ends up happening here didn't happen. That was the preventative measure. That was the prophylactic measure that was being taken. And that right there just throws up all kinds of red flags.
Well, it does, and I would step in and say, and I was raised a Catholic. I claim no religion at this point, but let me tell you the significance of the organization of Catholic doctors, so on and so forth, in this story. All right, everybody out there who is a Catholic knows that the Catholic are dead set against abortion. Okay, now, if by administering this infertility serum or vaccine to the public, unbeknownst to them, what this does to the human body is it makes, because the human body produces HGC or HCG, but the vaccine causes a reaction or an antibody to be built up in the body so that when HCG is formed at the beginning of a pregnancy, say there's only a couple of cells in this fetus, then the vaccine kicks in, the antibodies kick in, and they automatically abort the fetus.
Right,
So what you're
because
doing by causing the infertility is you're not causing infertility per se, you're causing spontaneous abortion by the body's immunity to this hormone that it's required for a pregnancy.
right, because quite simply, the standard idea behind a vaccine is to present the body with something so that its own immune system can develop an immunity to it. Now, we can argue about that all day, but let's just
Yeah,
say
it don't work, but anyway.
but either way, let's just
Yeah,
take that for granted for a moment that that is what the purpose of it is, and that
right.
is what happens to some elements that are introduced in this way.
No, it does. It does build an immunity. It
Yeah,
does. But the immunity is nowhere near effective. The immunity is nowhere near long lasting. And the autoimmune side effects of it screw your system up so bad. The sickest children in our country, and this, again, I just published another article about this. In 2007, a research study was done, and what they found out with 9,000 children being part of this study is that if you are a vaccinated child, your chances for having brain damage, whether it's autism, ADHD, or whatever, are between 155 and 224% higher than those who don't get vaccinated. So what we're showing here is we're not so much arguing that the vaccine doesn't work, because in fact it does set up an immunity to the HGC, which causes the spontaneous abortion. So, but the evil here is in the numbers, and we haven't gotten to that yet.
oh no, I wanted to take a moment because it's overwhelming information. So
Mm-hmm.
to take a breather there for a second, just to say, let's look at the logic really quickly here. What is actually happening? Very much like, over this past weekend, I was on a roundtable show and I said that, it seems to me as though peanut allergies became more prolific after they started using, peanut elements in the vaccines. Doesn't that make some
Fact.
kind of sense? It's a
It's
fact.
a fact.
Okay. Well, but that's not
But it's
something.
all kinds of food allergies, not just
Oh,
peanuts.
no, no, no. I'm just using that as an example
Yeah.
because it is so striking that rose up in the wake of those vaccines. Now, taking that principle and applying it to this, if you have a naturally occurring chemical and you're basically giving it to the body to develop an immunity against it and piercing the skin to do so, which is not the preferred method of developing an immunity, by the way. The body has all sorts of other introductory
Like
mechanisms,
like the lining of the stomach or
like the
the
lining
gut.
of the stomach, the nasal cavity. There are
Yep.
all sorts of different ways this can be done. But okay, let's put it aside. Point is that what you're doing indirectly is causing sterility. Not by causing sterility directly, but by causing the body to react during the process, the
Right.
natural process.
You're causing infertility.
Yeah,
Yes.
but
You're making these women infertile,
right.
which is the way they describe it. Yes.
Exactly. And I didn't want that to get lost. I wanted to make it, I wanted to dumb it down a little bit because I didn't want to get lost in all this because I know we're going to get real intense now. Okay.
All right.
But I
Okay.
apologize for that. I just really wanted to do that
No,
to
no,
point it
no.
out.
That's fine.
And of course, Dr. Nagare is exactly right in characterizing this as exactly as he does, and we're going to continue on with this.
Unethical and pure evil. Yeah, those are
Ethical.
his exact words, and you'll hear them in the show too.
Absolutely. And the links to that are all in this article as well, so let's not forget that. Okay. Sorry, Roger. Please.
Don't ever apologize for contributing to our discussions, please. But let's continue. Note: ELISA method, enzyme-linked immunoabsorbent assay. That's what the ELISA stands for. Also known as enzyme immunoassay, EIA, and a biometrical technique used mainly in immunology to detect the presence of an antibody or an antigen in a sample.
Right.
All right, so that's what the ELISA method is. Okay, Dr. Nagari is correct. Their actions were both unethical and pure evil, which took me to the next question. Again, Christina talking or asking questions to Dr. Nagari. I asked him why he believed that the WHO would do such a thing. And Dr. Nagare replied, WHO and other UN organizations, together with eugenic organizations like the IPPF, have had a population control agenda aimed at the lower developed countries for a long time. Refer to the link below for more information. Please, if you get a chance, refer to that link, and it's an article called National Security Study Memorandum, which basically individuals like Kissinger were advising the United States that in order to increase our security and our access to the resources of continents like Africa, a program of eugenics would be necessary. So this has been around for a very long time.
Mm.
This is a classified Secret Service document, by the way. The article that you or the link we put in there that you're going to read. So, sure enough, on reading the information supplied by Dr. Nagari, I learned these organizations had been studying ways to lower the population and what they called the lower developed countries, or the LDCs, for decades. The LDCs targeted in their 1975 document, which is the one I just described, and we gave you the link for, were India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nigeria, Mexico, Indonesia, Brazil, the Philippines, Thailand, Egypt, Turkey, Ethiopia, and Colombia. Each and every one of these, one of the poorest and least, or at that point, one of the least developed countries on the planet. I asked Dr. Nagari how many women in Kenya alone would would have would have been affected if the WHO had succeeded in their plans. The campaign was run in 16 out of 47 counties in the country. The Ministry of Health had targeted 2.4 million women in this campaign. Kenya has about 40 million people, with a ratio of men to women being roughly 50-50. In other words, 20 million would be girls or women. A target of 2.4 million works out to be 12% of all girls and women in just one campaign. So a significant portion of the fertile population. I asked him whether or not he had any final comments that he would like to portray to the public. Dr. Nagari replied, and we go through this guy's closing statements, and he's very powerful. The reputation of the WHO has been called into question many times in the past, but there is always inconclusive evidence and a great deal of media sensitization of information that they get away pretty much scot-free. The Catholic Church in Kenya has offered the world irrefutable evidence in this case, and the Kenya Tetanus Educational Campaign demonstrating clearly the forceful but secretive sterilization of a community. How much more damage and proof will the world demand before it takes action? That's his first comment. His second comment is, this is not an African problem. This is not a racial problem. It is a problem of good versus evil. Passivity allows evil to thrive and ever flourish. It is time individuals who stand for what is good understand that the only way to deal with evil is to control it head on and take action in this area of direct influence, e.g., at home, the workplace, and their local communities. His third comment: this chance must not be squandered. The Catholic Church in Kenya has done its part and will continue to be vigilant. However, We appeal to the people and private organizations of goodwill from all across the world to come together to support the Catholic Church in Kenya to fight the excesses of this organization. His Dr. Nagari is absolutely correct. We're back to Christina again. Dr. Nagari is absolutely correct. This is a problem of good versus evil, and we should ask ourselves whether or not the WHO has the right to forcibly sterilize millions of women and children without their consent. Dr. Nagari supplied the Liberty Beacon with a statement from the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops, Catholic Health Commission of Kenya, signed by RT Reverend Paul, and I believe it's Kurilaku Najaru. And I probably blew that, but you can read it yourself. The statement written to the people of Kenya outlines the true horrors of what had taken place in a chronological order. The Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops ended their statement with these words: both the Ministry of Health and WHO/UNICEF were trusted by the people of Kenya. They have broken this trust and betrayed those who depended on them. No further vaccination campaigns should be undertaken in this country without all-inclusive sampling and testing exercises done before, during, and after the campaign. Now, the Liberty Beacon responded. This was our response. Outraged by the atrocities outlined in this interview, the Liberty Beacon has promised to assist the Catholic Church of Kenya in any way possible to expose the truth, bringing the perpetrators to justice. Dr. Nagari has agreed to speak to the Liberty Beacon Network on radio, and that's included below this article already, in an hour-long broadcast by myself, Mr. Roger Landry, in a bid to inform the world of the truth and ask for their assistance in this matter. If you care about human dignity and the people of Kenya and wish to support us in our fight, please listen to this show. The preface for the show I'll read through real quickly, then I've got a few things to say that are not in this, but I have gleaned from my conversation with Dr. Nagari. So let's go through my preface for the show. TLB. With the steady increase in fertility in the United States and America being the most vaccinated society on this planet, well, has anybody even bothered to look at these vaccines to see if any of the massive amount of vaccines being given to the American society contain HCG? And the answer to that is no. So we told you the World Health Organization and UNICEF is intentionally sterilizing women and of childbearing age in the developing world. We also told you this was being done for several decades or longer, unseen and unchecked, and possibly affecting as many as, and here it comes, folks, no exaggeration, straight from the horse's mouth, Dr. Nagari, as you will hear it in the show, this has affected at least 100 million women in the developing world so far. And yes, believe it. Okay, but what if TLB could provide proof? What if we could give you answers straight from the horse's mouth? What if we could give you answers from the doctor on the team that did the actual research on these vaccines, saw firsthand the results, was instrumental in producing those results? Then we come to a point in time where we can no longer make excuses for the WHO. I'm telling you that he strongly suspects at least 100 million women in developing countries have been intentionally and against their will, forcibly, because it was done against their will, sterilized. What I'm also telling you is, through the information I got from Dr. Nagari, there are many programs that have been conducted in all of the other countries that I mentioned, not just Kenya, that he is not aware of. The statistics or the amount of population that was affected. I can tell you with pretty much certainty that 100 million is probably the tip of the iceberg. Anybody who doesn't see the total tyranny, the total evil in what we just presented to you right now is an idiot. I'm done, Chuck.
No problem. Absolutely right. And of course, we know that we don't just guess either, that this is the tip of the iceberg regarding this, because, and that was exactly the phrase I was going to use as well, there's other stuff going on. This is just in the one, you know how we talk about all the time, there is this, panopticon of attack on the human species that is going on, that from
I
all
like that word,
angles,
panopticon.
that
I like that.
these, well, it's the truth though.
I
Every
got it. I
single,
know. I know.
right? Every single
I
angle.
preach the same thing.
So here's what we talk about, right? There is no form. So okay, well, all right, Chuck, explain that really quickly. Well, they're putting stuff in your food that is dropping your fertility rates. They're putting stuff in, and we know about this. We know about this because it's been patented. It's been distributed. We know about the corn, don't we? Okay. We know about we talked about the HPV vaccine at the beginning of this, didn't we?
Didn't we also talk about epicite, which is a gene the government paid to have developed to put in GMO food that has no other purpose than to cause male infertility?
There you go. See, well, look, it's not just one sex. This is not a woman's issue. This is not a man's issue. This is a human being issue, and it is not just a developing world issue either. And meanwhile, think about that other point. Did anybody bother to even see if this stuff is in the vaccines in the United States?
We are the most vaccinated society on this planet. Let me give you a real shocker, people. we get maybe 70, 80 vaccines by the time we get through the period where vaccines are administered, all the way up through the HPV, all your boosters, everything else. But this is only about 20, 25 vaccines we're getting. It's boosters, it's other shots. They might give a series of 2 or 3 shots in order to reach a point where they consider it to be a break-even point or you've established immunity. So we're talking about a couple dozen vaccines and doing all of this damage to not only our fertility, but causing autism, causing cognitive dysfunction, so on and so forth. Here's the kicker, my friends. There are 395 more vaccines, Google it, sitting in the pipeline awaiting approval by the FDA and the CDC. If all of this damage is being done by a couple dozen, how much damage do you think is going to be done by well over 400? And I have one more thing to say about this, Chuck, and then I'll relinquish the floor to you again. But I have talked to several researchers who are under the firm belief that in the United States, the generation that was just born, the last generation to come into being, not my children, but my children's children, because I'm 3 generations old, okay? So if we go back 2 generations, that generation, this is what researchers are saying. You need to hear this. You need to hear this, people. They are saying, in America, this could be the first generation in history to have a shorter life expectancy than their parents. Did you hear what I just said?
Well, and from the observation, because I am effectively in your children's generation myself.
You are.
And I have children that are
younger than me, so you are.
I am, and I have children in 2 different age groups. I have children in the age group which would be in your grandchildren's generation. I have children that would also be in your great grandchildren's generation. At this point, I got one little boy.
Don't make me look too old here. Come on.
Hey, I'm just saying.
I know you've got an infant. I do know that.
And I'm not going to play his theme song, everybody. That's only on Kim's show. But because I got a little theme song for him, he recorded it. Anyway, but back to the serious point here. I know for a fact that my generation is already experiencing a shortened life expectancy.
Okay, can I jump in on that, please? Do you mind?
Yes, yes.
All right, let me explain to people why these individuals are what they're basing this on. Can you hear me, Chuck?
I hear you just
Hello.
fine. Yep,
All
I'm
right,
hearing you fine.
let me explain to you why these researchers are saying this in the first place. All right, 60 years ago, and you've all heard me say this, but it's a little preliminary. I was born into what was arguably the most healthy and vibrant society on the planet. Okay, today in America, we suffer the highest level of cognitive dysfunction, being Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, ADHD, so on and so forth. The highest on the planet. Let's go to autoimmune dysfunction. Autoimmune dysfunction covers a whole crapload of diseases, which I'm not going to go through the whole list. So I will categorize them into autoimmune dysfunctions. Guess which nation has the highest level of autoimmune dysfunction on the planet? Yup, the United States of America. The United States of America also has the highest rate of cancers in the baby boomer age group, which is 50 to 70 years old. We also have the fastest rising level of cancer incidences in children on the planet. We have the highest rate of food allergies. We have the highest rate of, or the fastest increasing rate of infertility on the planet. Now let's take all of those things, put them in a jug, put a nice tight cap on it, and shake it up real hard. What you get and what these researchers are seeing is not only are they saying we are arguably the sickest society on the planet today. Literally, more than one out of every two Americans suffers from some affliction or another. 50% or better of the
Mhm.
population. Now, put that into perspective. How does that autoimmune dysfunction, cancers, cognitive, how does that factor into your lifespan? Each and every one of them takes years off your life. So when I tell you, researchers are saying this may be the American generation that doesn't doesn't have the life expectancy of their parents, you need to listen because this is not a joke. It's not.
No,
But yet,
absolutely not.
we
Yeah.
are the most vaccinated, the most GMO, the most fluoridated, the most drugged, the most geoengineered society on the planet. Where does anybody out there figure that because we're Americans, we're immune from all this crap? And that's where your fancy word comes in, Chuck. There is no way to get away from this. You've got to breathe. You've got to drink water.
Hmm.
You've got to eat. All of these things you have to do. So the only way out of this is to become aware of it and put a stop to it because there's no place to hide from it anymore.
That's absolutely right. And the really complicated question that came through to me on the Skype, I'm going to tell you this. It does not matter which way you want to count the statistics. You could go per capita. You could go as a mean percentage of the population. Every one of his characterizations is absolutely correct. Every
Uh,
one.
I would tell you right now that almost 30% of the U.S. population is on pharmaceutical, either mind altering or psychotropic drugs.
Mhm.
At between 78 million and as high as 100 million, there are 315 million people in this country. Stop and consider that. That's one thing. Now, how many of us are vaccinated? Okay, we have a very high rate of vaccination in this country, especially amongst our children. So let's say, 75 to 80% of the population is vaccinated. How many of us eat GMOs? I would guarantee you at least 80 to 90% of this population, because it's hidden so well, you don't know you're
Right.
eating it. How many of us breathe chemtrail fallout or drink water at some point during the day that contains fluoride? We are massively exposed to all of this. And when I
Right.
tell you that about 50% of this population or more has one condition or medical condition or another, I'm not exaggerating.
No, if you just take the reported statistics of two categories regarding what do they call that, chronic treatment for illnesses and medications being given for them, and you just take the psychotropics, the SSRIs, this kind of stuff, if you
Yep.
just take the psychological meds and the pain meds that are being handed out,
Yep.
okay, even taking into account some overlap there, even if you assume a 50% overlap where somebody who has a psychological problem also needs pain meds, even if you do that, you're still looking at something like 60% of the population right there.
And how many of those do you think are your children? Nowadays, your kid has trouble in class. He's a little too rambunctious, whatever. He goes to the counselor, and the counselor does what? They end up by putting your child on drugs.
Right. The
This
school
is a fact.
psychologist is consulted, which means that the family doctor gets consulted or the district doctor gets consulted. In which case, now, in order to be a proper parent, so that they don't bother to call the ACS on you or the CPS or the DIFUS, depending on which state you're in. Thank you very much. It doesn't matter. In order to avoid having all of that sort of problem and having your life investigated and having you being called out as a bad parent and everything else, what happens? Well, you had to have been medicating them for this disorder they have.
And not only that,
Yeah.
but I have published many articles of children who have been taken out of their homes, away from their parents forever, simply because their parents refuse to allow their children to go on psychiatric or psychotropic drugs.
Yep. Yep. And this is not a rarity. This is
No,
not
it's not.
this is exactly why, unlike the mistakes of my past, I am certainly only examining things where I'm going to keep them out of the re-education, I mean, public schools. Excuse me, I almost got two things confused there.
The
But
propaganda facilities.
those things, right. Oh,
Yeah.
the school, yeah, the public schools, that's
Oh,
one
and
of the names for
Common
it.
Core. Common Core, which is nothing but bullshit.
Well, that's all good for them, Roger.
Yeah.
Along with the GMO'd lunch program and the,
Yeah,
ketchup
my,
as a
my
vegetable, and
My favorite picture for Common Core, I've got it and I use it all the time, is a rotten apple core.
that works perfect. Really
Yeah.
does. Oh, Roger. I don't know what you want to say about this, but I'm really glad that we discussed this because, and not because this is a big shocking story, but because this verifies what we're talking about. People
Well,
always say,
I really want to awaken a question in a lot of people. And that question is, as the most vaccinated society on the planet, with the highest rising rate of infertility on the planet, don't you think somebody ought to be looking at whether or not these vaccines are intended to sterilize us as they were intended to sterilize the populations of the third world?
well, there you go. I mean, again, after a while, when you find so many coincidental things, when you find so many seemingly perfectly aligned things, when you find things just working right along with an agenda which is already published,
You
when
mean
you
Agenda 21?
oh that too,
I would tell. Go ahead, Chuck.
sorry, along with the various statements over the years, from the eugenicists, which are virtually ignored in the mainstream media, although they are part of the culture, they're always part of the literature, they're part of the theatrical community. I mean, they're part of the Hollywood
Oh,
setups as far as
uh,
normalizing everything. They do all of that, and
I've got one
all of,
more tough question I need to throw in here before
okay,
I go, because your next guest is one of my favorite people in the world. But I do want to stick around to say hello to her. Um, if you stop and consider, okay, the fact that a report was released by accident and circulated around through the internet, showing that the population of the United States, and I think it's in 2030. It might be 2030 or 2050. I'm not exactly sure. And I'll do a little research. I'll bone up on that. But there was a report circulated that within the next 25 years, China would have basically the same population. Russia would have basically the same population because their infertility rates are rising as well. And the United States, the total population in the United States, and this is a U.S. government document. Okay, you know it was proofed 1,000 times before it was published. Our population is supposed to be 69 million. There's 315 million Americans. In the next 2 to 3 decades, where the hell, stop and think about it, where the hell are 250 million of us going?
Interesting.
This is a report released by the U.S. government stating, and I believe it's 2030, but it might be 2050. Either way, it's evil, stating that the U.S. population at that point in time will be 69 million people. If they're not sterilizing the crap out of us, and we do have the fastest rising level of infertility on the planet, not the highest level, but the fastest rising level. If they're not doing that intentionally, why the hell are they publishing documents to the United Nations showing that the U.S. population will be under 70 million within the next 3 decades?
Well, isn't that an interesting question? Because after all, like you were saying, the steep rising curve, as it were, if you were to lay this out on one of those wonderful graphs, we are the steepest rising curve. We don't have the highest instance of infertility as of yet, but we are.
Well, you have third world countries that they've gone in and sterilized a big majority of their population, so their infertility rate's going to be higher than ours. But at the rate we're increasing, we will pass everybody very quickly.
Right, we're going to surpass everybody if the trend continues, right?
Yes.
So there you go, and that's indisputable. That's indisputable. The trend is going in that direction. If you lay it out and you watch it over one of those, what do they call those exactly? You know what I'm talking about? The graph where you can watch it spike and you're watching it climb nice and high, and it's actually tipped up in the past 5 years.
I would tell you that at this point right now, okay, the only way to get the U.S. population below 70 million within the next 2 generations is either to totally sterilize us or to bring a war to American soil, or a combination of both.
Well, there you go. Or of course, there's always the
Death from a spaceship?
I hate to even say this because it's just one of those things where it's like, oh, look, now he's one of those nuts. But, if you create a conflict that appears to have happened, all by itself through a natural cause,
no, there's nobody that evil. Come on. You're talking about dividing the population and having us fight amongst ourselves. No, that could never happen. It's happening right now.
There you go. It's already happening kind of in slow motion, but believe me, they can speed it up anytime they want. All you got to do is have, some sort of natural disaster which creates a cascading effect, and the next thing you know is...
You mean like an Ebola scare where they start to take a bunch of us and throw us in what they will call isolation camps?
Yeah, whether you're infected or not.
Yeah, I just published an article about that today. But right now I'm stepping on Ariana's toes, and I don't want to do that. This is a very, very intelligent woman, a very pleasant woman to talk to, and one of my favorite people. So if you want to bring her in, I'll say hello, and then I'll say goodbye.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I'm not sure if she's up online at this very moment. Did tell her to be, but may have to go back and check on the social media really quickly because she might think she needs to message me through there. But I did tell her I'd call her through Skype right about now. And I do want to bring her on. But to continue on with what we were just discussing while I do that, doesn't it seem, again, kind of convenient as they sort of beta test these things, like the Ebola scare, which I still say is just a massive beta test. I don't believe that there's going to be a major Ebola outbreak, whether real or manufactured. Okay, but it does give them the test case, doesn't it? It does give them the ability. It sets precedents. You see, and the next.
I'm not so sure I agree with that. I agree with everything you said, but I take it one step further, and I would tell you that it never stopped. It just went away because people don't buy stuff over the holidays if they're in a panic. I don't think the Ebola scare ever went away, and I do think that we're going to see a lot more about that in the coming months.
You think so?
I definitely do.
All right. Well,
Definitely.
I will respectfully disagree with you on this one. I think it was merely the beta test, but it does set the precedent. It does normalize the possibility, doesn't it? It does give them a well, the Ebola thing didn't get out of hand because
She's online now.
I got her. I see her. But it does give them that precedent, doesn't it?
Yep.
So
Oh no! I mean, it triggered a lot of things, including an executive order.
right, right. But you know how those executive orders work is that sometimes they get enacted and they're seized upon later as a justification for something even further.
What most
That's
people don't understand about executive orders is that you and I, they're not supposed to affect us. An executive order is only supposed to affect the administrative staff that is responsible to the executive branch. Period. What most people don't understand is that there is no real authority over the people via an executive order.
but that hasn't stopped them from utilizing it
Nope, because
to.
nobody knows that, and nobody will stand up and scream that in his face.
That's correct. That's correct. So,
All right.
as we had discussed earlier, and as I am extremely looking forward to, I have Ariana Love on the line with us, and this is the first time that her and I have actually had a conversation, though we have been in contact other ways, and I think this is going to be a really interesting hour for everybody listening. So, Roger, I know that you had plenty of wonderful things to say about Ariana, but I'll
Oh,
let
I'm
you.
not done yet. I'm just out of time.
Well, I know. That's why I'm going to give you a couple more seconds to let everybody know who they're going to be listening to here because I had a hard time figuring out how to describe her in the ads, so I just put her name up and figured if you're listening, you're going to hear something special, and here we go.
Well, I'm going to tell you who Ariana Love is. Ariana Love is an American living in Finland. She is a huge. Um, well, let me put it to you this way: the thing she cares the most about is people. She cares about the people on this planet. She cares about the suffering being caused by the elites on this planet. She cares about anybody who is suffering, being downtrodden, being oppressed. And she does put a large focus on the Middle East because right now, what we see in Palestine and other areas in that region are really under some of the heaviest foot of tyranny we've seen in a very long time. She is a humanitarian, she is a researcher, she is an excellent writer, and she is my executive assistant. And I've got to tell you something, if it wasn't for her, many a day I'd be straying off the path. How did I do, Ariana?
Sounds pretty good, Roger.
Okay. Well, anyway, I've already barged into your time way too much. I know Chuck's in for a treat. What you have to discuss today, I'm intimately familiar with, but I think the audience would should hear it from you. So, Chuck, thank you for the time. Ariana, I wish you a great show.
I do.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to have Roger Landry on. And of course, check out the article we discussed, all the links I dropped in the chat room tonight. And always take a look at The Liberty Beacon. That is all one word together, thelibertybeacon.com. And I'm telling you, it is, you don't have enough time in the day to even begin to read the remarkable, excellent, and extremely informative articles that you won't get anywhere else. And, the stuff from Roger especially, but there are many contributors to the site, so I encourage you to take a look and explore that always. So thank you, Roger, and we will be in touch in the next few days, by the way,
All
off the
right.
air. So,
All right, my friends. Goodbye.
all right. So, Ariana,
Yes, hi, Chuck.
No problem. I was trying to figure out how to introduce you exactly to get this across to people. I know what I want to talk to you about. But let's first get an idea for, okay, you're an American living in Finland, right?
Right.
Your focus, okay, at least in discussions with me, has been a lot on the Middle East. And of course, this is one of the most profound areas where tyranny can be cited and quantified on the planet, especially in the case of the thing that turns my stomach every single time I even begin to open one of my eyes and look at it, which is in the area of Palestine. But either way, I wonder if you want to sort of tell people a little bit about who you are and how it is that you became kind of fixated on the Middle East. Although Roger did say, you're a humanitarian in general and do care about all people, and seemingly the freedom of humanity, much like myself. But let's kind of give people an idea about that, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. Okay, sure. Well, let's see, I have a background in corporate finance. First, I was in film school and then went to Hollywood and noticed the level of corruption and, that Hollywood was not what it appears to be on the outside. And so I became very frightened of the idea of fame. I was an actress, very talented, but I walked away from it for a career in corporate finance.
Mm.
That actually brought me to Finland because we were acquiring advanced technologies. So Finland is one of the most advanced nations in the world right now in technology, but also in other things like education. So I lived in Finland for 7 years and had a couple of children here with a Finnish man. We did divorce years ago, and I have been raising my sons. I have 2 teenage sons. I've been raising them for the past 13 years, pretty much all alone. And so I had to abandon my career.
Mm.
It was a very satisfying career, though, because it taught me about global economics and how things work in the financial banking system. So it was very eye-opening. Plus, I was in touch with advanced technologies. So I could see the growing trends that were, in front of us.
So you got to see things, in terms of, like, say, the world stage that I like to describe all the time. You got to see it from 2 different angles, really, rather profoundly. One, that's sort of a false reality, which is created by the Hollywood types. And I mean, I've talked about being a musician and having gone out to, the Hollywood area, being in Los Angeles and feeling like I was on another planet because of the strangeness that goes on out there. But of course, that's part of the unreality business of the world. But on the other hand, you also got to dig very deeply into the real nuts and bolts of the financial blood of things, as it were. So you got to see that reality, alongside of the unreality, and then of course, doing your own thing and trajectory of life being what it is, you wound up, having to step away from that and taking care of your sons, which are now teenagers, and that's pretty interesting. That's pretty interesting. I find that kind of remarkable, though, and I do see that a lot, where sometimes people that are involved in sort of creative interests wind up getting themselves into things which are rather complex and sort of advanced, in comparison to the rest of the population. So that's interesting. Of course, I'm not going to pick too much at the what advanced technology means, but just being sort of in that part of the world, there's a good chance you could become involved in that sort of industry too, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll give you an example. We were consulting Nokia, and they had this touchscreen technology, and we did tell them to launch it, but they held back. And anyway, that's history, you know.
And nowadays, everybody else is doing it, and they were they lost out by not heeding your advice, huh?
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
Well, how I got into being an activist for Palestinian human rights, especially,
Hmm.
is I was living. I went back to the United States, and I was living there for about 7 years. And I felt very unsafe. I mean, I was watching the economy. Since 9/11, the economy has just taken a dive. Everything's taken a dive. Our liberties, our freedoms are being chipped away at. And by 2012, I said, that's it, I'm out of here. I'm going back to Finland.
So
And I
post
didn't. I'll be,
okay.
huh?
I'm sorry. Post 9/11 reality though
Yeah.
is definitely a different reality. So if you were out of the country and then returned to it, it must have been fish out of water syndrome big time, because this is not the same country that it was previous to 2000, previous to September 11th, 2001. It just isn't. So you felt that, and
That's right.
therefore, yeah, I guess I can
I'm
easily see being
fortunate
better.
that I had a place to go. I
Hmm.
think so. I felt that I needed to provide a safer environment for my children. And Finland definitely is that, at least for now. Um, but it was when I returned to Finland in 2012 that I had the time to do research. And what I chose to do was research 9/11.
Hmm.
And I spent every day pretty much going over videos and all the facts and details. Well, it was in the fifth month that I stumbled upon one documentary film that provided evidence of Israel's involvement in 9/11. And I was totally shocked because I didn't see that coming at all. And I had no idea that of the Israeli state policies of genocide, and that the Jewish people are the only ones who have rights there.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it's really far beyond apartheid. Um, but what I did was my attention went to Palestine at that point. And a couple months later was it Operation Pillar of, was it Pillar of Defense? Oh gosh, I get them mixed up. But 2012, they did another bombing campaign in Gaza.
Hmm.
And due to Facebook, I was able to follow the news that people were posting, and I began adding people from Palestine, and I was so astonished. I mean, it just sickened me. I never, I saw the images coming from Gaza, and something happened to me. I have never been the same. It was like a fire lit inside me. And I swear, since then, for the past 3 years, I've been researching into Zionism, the Israeli state, Palestine, daily. There's so much information, I just take it in and take it in. And then I share it on social media sites.
Well, let me ask you a question really quickly here, because it does help to shape the perspective a little bit. Do you have a particular religious faith that you sort of identify with?
Sure. I'm Muslim,
You're
and I'm
Muslim.
not, yeah, I don't wear the hijab because I grew up in the West, and so I can't, I don't feel comfortable doing that. I think it will draw more attention to me than if I didn't wear it, and so I just want to be comfortable.
Hmm.
But,
No,
and
I
I
was
have my own beliefs about that. I mean, I read the Quran,
right.
and basically, after after discovered that Israel was involved in 9/11, of course, a cabal within our own government, um, I then began to, as a curious mind that I have, I was wondering, well, why are Muslims being blamed? Why is Islam being blamed? What is the reason for that? So I thought, okay, I better find out. I started reading the Quran, and basically everything in the Quran was compatible with the things that I believe. And I actually found out that a lot of the stuff that's floating around out there that people say is the Quran isn't. It comes from either the Hadith, the supporting books, which aren't the Quran,
Hmm.
or false translations,
Yeah,
just like
that's
we have with the Bible.
yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, there was a time back in the '90s when it was actually kind of difficult to get your hands on an English version of the Quran. Um, and and to read it, sometimes you had to sort of double check the translations, because even though they did make efforts to make these things accessible, later on, they weren't necessarily perfect in translation. That was one thing. The other thing is that I always find it remarkable, because uh, the people that a lot of people figure that this is merely a Muslim versus the Jewish state problem.
Right.
But what I discovered, through talking to people that had come from Palestine, is that this is really a serious mischaracterization. It is not merely Muslims that are targeted. That it's kind of irrespective even. There are Palestinians who are Christians. There is a significant population of Palestinian Christians that are, they don't really differentiate between them, the Muslims, and the secular ones that are in Palestine. And believe it or not, there are actually secular people in Palestine who don't actually have a religious, orientation, as it were. A lot of people forget about that. But this is really a humanitarian crisis as opposed to a holy war of sorts, in my estimation.
That's right. And it does concern us all.
Yes.
Make no mistakes about that. It concerns every nation on this earth. It may not seem like that on the surface, but when you dig deeper, you find out that we're all in danger. Zionism is a beast. It is the evil of the earth, and it has been around a very long time.
Right.
But Palestine was always a land for all. It was famous. It was known as a land for all people. People were welcome, and they could come from, and they did. They came from all over the Middle East. It was like a central. Jerusalem was like the center of the Middle East.
Right.
And
And customarily, and a lot of people don't know this about the character of the individuals that are there. I mean, these are the type of people that carry what would be, sort of described as a Middle Eastern sort of characteristic regarding even foreigners or outsiders, unless they're under siege. That, of course, changes the complexion of things. But when they're not under siege, you're talking about people that generally welcome in strangers and would take them into their homes and protect them, even above their own families. This is the type of individuals that we're talking about who are, there for generations,
that's right.
long before there was an Israeli state. Long before any of that, the culture of these people is something that is extremely diverse and completely misunderstood and misrepresented in the Western media, for certain.
Right. They're presented as terrorists. They're dehumanized.
Right.
But these are the most welcoming, hospitable people to a fault that you'll ever meet. They do. They take you right into their home. I mean, they have trouble trusting nowadays because there are spies and there are people taking advantage of the occupation to make money. NGOs that go in there, and all kinds of, there's corruption within the PA. But the people themselves are just amazing. Amazing. Their spirituality is so deep and so rich, and they understand the value of life and living, and they understand, even when they have so little, they'll spend their last dollar to prepare you a beautiful meal because you're a guest in their house.
Yeah, that's part of what I was talking about, is that the way that they treat guests, and that's how they accept foreign travelers and so on and so forth. This is historically, this is the historical reality of the culture there. And again, I'm not talking about the religious faith. I'm talking about the general culture. And
That's right.
the religious faith is demonized all the time,
Well,
but I'm not even getting into that. I'm just saying, if you just look at the culture of the individuals, the commonality between them, irrespective of religious faith. Religious faith is another level of that. But I just wanted to make that point because I never hear that point being made anywhere.
well, even the Christians, I mean, here I keep going back to religion, but even the Christians have this incredibly rich faith that you don't see from Christians in the West.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the ancient roots in this area, they have knowledge that you wouldn't believe. And Jews, Christians, Muslims, they have all lived in peace and harmony in Palestine for thousands of years as brothers and sisters.
Right.
Literally. I mean, babysitting for each other and stuff like this. And even the Jewish population in Palestine has suffered. The Jews who were there before the occupation, they're not happy with the occupation. And they tend to follow their own teachings. The Hasidic Jews, they follow the Torah, the Talmud. If the Jewish people were to follow their own teachings, there wouldn't be these problems. Because in their own teachings, it says they are not allowed to have a homeland until the judgment. You know, every text, every scripture talks about the judgment. And in theirs, that's a very strict rule. And it says that if they do try to do this, it will be their own demise.
See, and I've been blasted for saying something like that before, where I've said, essentially that if you read the scripture correctly, it sounds to me as though the state of Israel as it stands is completely an illegitimate animal from what it is that they describe in the scriptures, because this is post the judgment. Like you said, this is an act of God which would give them this homeland, and these particular situations that need to come together based on that description have not occurred. Okay, so what stands there now is not the legitimate biblical concept of the promised land, and I hate to use that phrase, but I'm sorry, the promised land that their God, told them they would have. It's not the same thing.
Well, that was inserted into the Bible. That's total baloney.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the New Testament, don't even read that book. It's been tampered with, and if you can know this by if you research who funded the translation. That's the answer right there. This was by design. If you go to the old King James Version, it doesn't talk about the state of Israel or an Israeli homeland, a homeland for Jews or Israel.
Right.
I mean, so this was inserted. It's manipulation. It's mind control. I mean, and who's doing it are the ones that have the money. So they control the financial banking system. See, Zionism has been around a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And Zionism is a whole lot more than just a homeland for Jews. That's what it is on the surface. There's a whole lot more behind it. If you look at the Israeli state policy, it's beyond racist. I mean, it is apartheid. It's the laws themselves do not value any human life other than a Jew. I mean, do we accept this?
Yeah, that's what the concept is. The concept of Jewish supremacy, is what I prefer to call it sometimes when we're discussing this, because that's really what it sounds like.
That's what it is.
Again, I'm not an insider to it.
And that's just part of the brainwashing.
Right.
It's, that is, well, it's complicated. You'd have to read the Torah and the Talmud to understand it. But the Israeli state policies are based not on the Torah. The Torah was inspired by Moses, who was a prophet and came from the Abrahamic tradition. So the teachings of Moses are the same as the teachings of Jesus and the same as the teachings of Muhammad. It's one religion.
Right.
If the Jewish people were following Moses' teachings or Jesus' teachings or Muhammad's teachings, and they would be following the Torah. And the Torah is just a piece of the Talmud. They inserted it into the Talmud. Before Moses came, they were following the Talmud. Now, the Talmud has been around since Babylon days. And it is the most evil, racist, sinister book you cannot imagine. There are 6 pages in that book condoning an adult having sex with a child that's 3 years old in one day. A rabbi can marry a little girl that's 3 years old in one day. And there's 6 pages of this in the Talmud, and people don't know that. There is a sickness in our world that is completely connected with the financial banking system. These guys and Hollywood and entertainment industries, these guys are pedophiles. And there's been a lot of whistleblowers coming forward and talking about this.
No, absolutely, and of course,
I hardly ever get to talk about this. I do have a bit of a charge, an emotional charge, because there's a lot of information that I keep to myself because people can't handle it.
Well, and that's usually kind of the interesting part of my show, is that people get to talk about things that they don't often get to talk about on other shows. That's kind of what I do. And this is something that I'm, still struggling to understand, to be honest with you, because a lot of it is extremely counterintuitive to what I understood previously. You know what I mean about what the tenets of the religion were, what what the idea behind, the mainstream idea that we were taught in schools when we were kids about what the state of Israel actually represented, why it was there, things like this. You come to find out that much like a whole lot of other narratives in history, it's essentially a lie. And this is what the problem is. Now, before I wind up getting harangued with the question, because I know that my chatters and my regular listeners are going to bombard me with this question in about 5 different forms. So I'm just going to give it to you, because anytime we mention 9/11 or Israel, this question comes up. Do you understand what I mean when I say the dancing Israelis on 9/11?
Definitely. I just wrote an article, actually. It was published in the Liberty Beacon. It's called 9/11 Reality, Israel, Friend or Foe. And it's basically based on Ryan Dawson's documentary, where he provides the evidence of Israel's direct involvement in 9/11. Those dancing Israelis, they worked for a Mossad front organization called Urban Moving Systems. They had passes to the World Trade Center, and they most definitely planted the bombs. It couldn't have been anybody else. They were caught dancing and taking pictures, celebrating, holding lighters, and taking snapshots of the World Trade Center. They were arrested, by the way. And actually, in my article, I have the NYPD recording. Radio transmission when they arrested these guys, and they reported what they were doing. Well, they took them down to the station. Those guys spent 7 weeks in jail, and they were released back to Israel with no more than a visa violation of overextending their stay. Well, they were found with traces of explosives on their clothes, traces of explosives in the van. And this was a white van owned by Urban Moving Systems. On that same day, there were 2 other vans located in different areas, and they were also owned by Urban Moving Systems. One of them was intercepted by the NYPD right outside the George Washington Bridge, and that one also had 2 Mossad agents, and it also had full of explosives, enough to blow up the George Washington Bridge. So the NYPD, there was a live, press release in the media stating that they believed that the NYPD had intercepted the next target. There were 130 Israelis arrested that day. Okay, about 40% of them were Mossad agents, proven Mossad agents. They were all given lie detectors. They all failed, and all of them were released back to Israel.
No, yeah, I knew what answer I was going to get out of you, because we covered in part the article that you did a couple of weeks ago. So I knew where we were going, but I wanted to get it out there because
it was Michael Chertoff, a dual nationality with Israel and the United States. He ran the Department of Justice Criminal Investigations Division at that time. He later ran the Department of Homeland Security. But he's now, I don't think he's no longer in the government over there. I don't know what he's doing. But he released those Israelis. He pardoned them. So he's a traitor, absolutely. I mean, we have this terrorist we have many of them in our own government. There's actually, this whole thing was coordinated with a cabal within our own government, within the CIA, who worked directly with the Mossad in Israel. And, that's what the 28 redacted pages of the 9/11 Commission report are all about. They directly prove that Israel, it's all about foreign state involvement. Well, those foreign states are Israel and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia provided the financing. It was funneled through Pakistan. And Israel, was given the bombs. and the Mossad planted them.
Mm.
And, you know, the hijackers, by the way, the so-called hijackers, who were so-called Muslim hijackers, right? They're all living today. They were all arrested, and they were helped by the FBI. They were released, and, you know, I don't know what happened to them. They disappeared, but, you know, there's record of them having been arrested. Oh, and also, every one of them had worked for either the CIA or the Mossad prior. So it's pretty obvious, you know.
Well, right, and my discussion about this always leads to the fact that you can find Mossad agents ever present, seemingly in nearly every CIA operation, you know, anymore involving the Middle East, especially. But they always seem to be there, regardless of whether they should be or not. And even when we're talking about military intelligence and some of the stuff, I mean, I had a whistleblower on this show discussing the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, you know, and the torture at Abu Ghraib and all that. And he even describes, for no apparent reason, even though, you know, our military intelligence guys and central intelligence guys were, you know, working out of the same building and everything else, they're just, for no apparent reason, they had Mossad agents present, you know, always seeming to be a part of the equation. You know, when in reality, I mean, from a strategic standpoint, you wouldn't want these guys anywhere involved in that mess, especially during the first invasion of Iraq. That would have just, you know,
Well, the CIA has always belonged to the cabal. This cabal being, you know, the elite bankers, so-called elite bankers, the Rothschilds, you know, they controlled UK and Europe before America was even established. They're the
Right.
same people, same family. They always controlled the CIA, and the CIA basically is like their right arm, and the Mossad is their left arm. So they use both, but the Mossad is more secret. You see, people know who the CIA is.
Right.
But the Mossad can get in there and get out, and nobody really suspects Israel, you know. And they are the masters of diverting the attention onto somebody else, like Muslims.
There you go. And gee, isn't that interesting? And I'm always railing about the fact that you know, that you know, the imagined boogeyman of you know, the Muslim extremist, you know, is really just a fiction for the most part. It has been utilized as you know, as a tactical element of you know, the dissemination of the fear porn that sort of, you know, keeps people submitting, acquiescing to all sorts of you know, you know, the devaluation of their own freedoms, the loss of their own civil liberties in this country and elsewhere, under the guise of protecting them from this great boogeyman, which is for the most part a fiction. You know, and in some cases where there is an actual, you know, Muslim extremist group, if you look hard enough at it, you'll find that it's generally controlled by one of the intelligence agencies, if not more
That's
than one.
right. Yeah, that's right. And they try to call, you know, well, I shouldn't go there. I was going to bring up Hamas, but they try to do the same thing with Hamas and say that that's a Islamic, you know, fundamentalist organization. Well, and they call them, of course, a terrorist organization, but that's just because they're resisting. They're resisting for their lives, you know. Anybody would resist. But they're not Islamic. You can't say they're Islamic fundamentalists because, first of all, there's Christian sects in Hamas, you know, fighting and defending their land. They're not strictly Muslims. It's just that the majority of Palestine has always been Sunni Muslims.
Mm.
But that doesn't mean that they're Islamic. These are people. These are people resisting occupation, you know, this just brutal occupation. And they have every right to do so. It's with, you know, the fourth Geneva Convention, I think, states that a militarily occupied people have a duty to defend themselves. And that includes by the use of force.
Mm. No, and that's absolutely true. And I mean, forgetting about conventions, treaties, or anything else, I mean, you just figure that it would be, you know, the responsibility of any living, breathing human being to resist, you know, occupation, to resist, to defend themselves. I mean, isn't that just a basic human right that seems, you know, implied by one's own creator, regardless of who you think is writing the books? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It seems to me to be a universal thing. Not necessarily, relegated to one particular section of the world or one particular side of any particular political argument. It's all irrelevant. It's about, survival in a lot of cases. And
But they have to demonize the people that they're killing, that they're doing genocide on. Otherwise, the humanity would not accept it. If you
right.
can demonize them and everyone thinks they're terrorists and they're afraid of them, they're not going to build a connection with them, a human connection. And they've done the same thing with Syria. They've whitewashed the crimes that are going on there more so than they're doing with Palestine.
Oh,
You would not believe.
you think it's
Yeah,
more so in Syria than in
more
Palestine,
so.
even?
Oh, I'm getting ready to do a series of broadcasts about Syria, and the information's going to blow people's minds. Absolutely. I can't even begin to talk about it because it won't make sense. It's so much information, but yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I'm just
Well,
dying to talk about Syria.
Well, it's
Really.
okay if you want to hold off on that. We can continue to
Yeah.
occupy ourselves because, to me, this has been one of the greatest tragedies, that I see continuously unfolding. Over.
One thing that people have to understand is that the people being killed in Syria, and now this is massive genocide, okay? And it is covered up by our media, by our Zionist-controlled media. It is totally whitewashed. Bashar al-Assad's using barrel bombs. This is against it. These are internationally banned weapons. And you've got 3 million people, and he's the only one with helicopters and, an air force. So he's the only one dropping them. Now, so the media just whitewashes it. You just don't hear about it in the media. They're not reporting on it. And even when I do throw an article around here and there, people say it's not true. They're just in complete denial, and they see Bashar as this victim, which he's just totally not. And the revolution could not have happened without him. And this is what I will go into. But he's protected. He's going to be in power for a long time. That's the plan. And, he's being allowed to genocide the people who resist him. And Syria has, the Assad regime has a history of genocide and of killing the people who resist the regime, like the Hama massacre. That was, it was his father, Bashar's father, Hafiz al-Assad. He killed 40,000 people in like 3 days because this village rose up against him. So, genocide's nothing new in Syria. And this kind of behavior of the Assad regime, it's nothing new.
couple
They're
of
very, very corrupt. And
couple.
basically, their prisons are basically torture dens. They've got men, women, and children in them, and they prefer to keep people alive as long as possible and to inflict as much torture. They'll keep them alive for a year and
Well,
just torture them.
that's precisely, like I said, why I had one of the guys who was a medical, basically a battlefield medic who was at Abu Ghraib and a couple of the other prisons in Iraq, is to explain what's going on over there regarding the torture. And to tell you the truth, the guy is so traumatized from having patched people together after
Oh,
these interrogations and things. He doesn't even get into some of the descriptions on the air, but I'm trying to illustrate it with him piece by piece in a series of shows. And it's not just about Iraq. It's about what is actually going on in that entire region. And this is not purely an
yes.
American problem either. This is what is happening, as we speak.
It's a
Um,
collaborated effort.
right.
Everybody's benefiting. Everybody struck a deal. It just, if do you think it would be hard for the United States government to find Bashar? Look, how long did it take them to find Gaddafi? I think it was like, or Saddam Hussein. Saddam, I think it was 8 months or something. But, it's not hard. They know exactly where he is. He's.
I never buy these stories of we're having a hard time finding anybody because I'm sorry, I know what the
Osama
technology's like.
bin Laden.
You
He
know,
was already dead.
Yeah, right. I mean, and even putting that narrative aside, let's just look at the logic behind we can't find something or someone on this planet. You can look at every inch of this planet from a satellite, from various devices. You can tie into all sorts of things, and we know this. I have never understood how it is that unless you are literally hiding underground somewhere with no lights, no technology whatsoever, how you could not be found. And most of the times these guys, it's really one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen. A couple of random comments and I think questions coming from the chat room, if you don't mind, because I don't even understand this question, but I'll just ask it to you anyway. I'm being asked, are you aware of the term, and it's SAYAMIM or NIM?
Simon? No.
No, okay. I had no idea for that one, so, okay. Let's see. What else do we have here?
I'm getting ready to do a lot more research, though, on Syria. I mean, I have the knowledge, but I want to do a series of articles and broadcasts. Basically, the Syrian people and the Palestinian people, they're the same people. They're one and the same people. These are the people being having genocide done to them in that region are Sunni Muslims. They say it's not sectarian, but just look at the numbers.
Right.
You know?
The difference
Right?
between Hezbollah and Hamas is coming up in a couple of different comments, and also one on Skype.
Oh, I can talk about that.
Yeah.
See, I went to Palestine. I didn't mention this, but after in 2000 very beginning of 2013, and I lived there for half a year in the West Bank, and then after that I went to Jordan, and I lived there for 4 months, and I was interviewing Syrian refugees. And what I got a lot of information, and I swear I never would know these things if I hadn't been there. You cannot find the truth in the media. You just can't piece it together. It's too difficult. But when you hear it from the mouth of the refugees, you can trust that. So the difference between Hezbollah and Hamas. Okay, Hamas is entirely Palestinians. This is a resistance. There's no foreign fighters, so you can't call them terrorists. They are Palestinian people performing their right to resist. Hezbollah, now, as I understand it, okay, Israel sold weapons to Iran back in, they got caught doing that through the Iran-Contra scandal, right? They were selling weapons to Iran. Well, those very same weapons they sold to Iran are now being given to Hezbollah and to Hamas by Iran. Now, Hezbollah are Shia Muslims. It's easy to, okay, the CIA oftentimes uses Shia Muslims to create so-called Islamic militia. They're not resistors. They're actually militia, and they wreak havoc. And the reason is because if you look at the Shia indoctrination, it's considered an honor to kill Sunni Muslims. They don't accept Sunni Muslims as Muslims. Mm-hmm. They're also not following the Quran. Now, I'm just going to say that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they are one and the message of the prophets are one and the same. It's one religion, and we are not allowed to make sects out of them. We are not. We're not allowed to make sects out of Christianity, and that just fuddles everything. That's not, then it's no longer Christianity, And so it's the same with Islam. The only sect of Islam that follows the Quran are the Sunni, and they were the original. And they are the majority of the Muslims in the world who call themselves Muslims are Sunni. And now in Saudi Arabia, for example, you have Wahhabism, which was also another sect.
That's a different one, and one that nobody ever mentions. They're way more extreme than anything that we see, generally speaking, to my understanding.
And that's not Islam. That's just not. That's another sect, and it's a false religion. I'm sorry. I will say it like it is. We are not allowed to create sects. You're just not allowed to do it. And Judaism has done it. Christians have done it. And, of course, now it's so-called Muslims have done it. Now, I love humanity. I love people. And if somebody's got a good heart, I don't care where you come from or where your background is, I'm going to love you. You know, if you embrace humanity and you're not racist, you're all right by me, you know.
Yeah, well, see, that's how I come down on it too. I mean, I am not so much concerned with who you pray to. I am more concerned with your actions in the world, and so long as you're not doing harm, you're fine by me. You know, that's the only thing. That's the only thing that worries me. If you're not harming others, you know, even if you choose to harm yourself, I think that's your business. You know what I
That's
mean?
right.
Uh, you know, so I'm
And a lot
kind
of
of
people see that as weakness when you have a empathy towards your fellow human being. I mean, we are so programmed to be egotistical and ego driven and materialistic and, you know, to care about the appearances. But, you know, this is not it. Empathy is everything. When you lose your empathy, you might as well not be a human being anymore. Go back
right.
to being an animal or something, you know?
No,
It's
exactly.
empathy is everything. Human connection is everything. And it is the fundamental basic human need as well. There was a study done by Harvard University, which inspired a book called The Connection. And they found that what makes certain people successful and other people fail is that the people who succeed in life have a meaningful, consistent relationship. And it can be just one person. If you don't have that, you have premature death, you have accidents, you get depressed, you have disease, these kinds of things. This is what they found in
Right.
that study.
I talk about this all the time on this show. Is that this is what the real illness is in the culture, as it were, is that we are disconnected. And you know, the fact is that human beings are social creatures. We are literally designed to be that way. I mean, I've said this many times, and I know people think I'm goofy for saying it, but you know, if you don't hold a baby after they're born, they often die. They will
Yeah.
die, in fact, without human contact. And you know, Maria Heller, who's been a repeated guest on my show, also points out when I bring that up, whenever she's on, she also says, "Yeah, and guess what? You know, people that are toward the end of their life cycle live a lot longer if they have human contact as well. It's an absolute documented scientific fact that human interaction is one of the necessities of life. It just is." You know, and therefore, just taking that scientific notion into mind, you know, if it is as essential as everything else over the course of your life, then it means to me that just like we're creatures that are meant to eat, we're creatures that are meant to drink water, and we're creatures that are meant to create things, and we're creatures that are meant to do, you know, so on and so forth, it seems as though we're also meant to be connected to one another. You know, and it doesn't mean that you have to be connected to the entire world, but you know what? If we were all connected, you know, to some of the world, then we would all be connected vicariously to one another, wouldn't we? You know.
I found myself through Palestine. I mean, I found my reason for living again. I spent the last 13 years devoted to my kids. I, you know, didn't have any support. I raised them myself, and it was really, really painful, extremely painful, and very difficult. I couldn't so much as even have a hobby for myself. I was so busy almost the entire time. And, you know, it's through suffering that we are humbled and we learn to feel other people's suffering. And I saw my kids growing up, becoming teenagers, and I was like worried because, okay, I'm not married, and what's going to happen when they become adults and they go out and live on their own? I'm going to be alone. What am I going to do with my life? They've been my whole life.
Right.
So I found a reason for, you know, living again by helping Palestine, you know, helping expose the truth. And I'll tell you something about the Palestinian people. They are so beautiful. There are so many saints in Palestine. And um, after about 3 months living there, I noticed that nobody was talking bad about the Jewish people. Not a single Muslim I met had anything bad to say about the Jews. And I would bring it up all the time. You know, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? And then I finally asked the question, why? Why aren't you angry? I mean, don't you, you know, why is it that you don't ever criticize your neighbors for what they're doing to you? And they said to me, this is what everybody says over there. They say that Islam and the Quran says that Jews are brothers and sisters,
Mm.
and that they understand that the problem is Zionism.
Okay, just as a quick warning, we've only got
Yeah.
about 5 minutes left. Believe it or not, we just went through a whole hour. Now, an odd thing did come up. Somebody wants to know if that's actually your real name in the chat room.
Yes,
It,
it is.
okay,
It is my legal name. I was born with. My father is Dr. Love, Dr. Eric Love. He's a holistic doctor. And so I was born with that name. I recently just changed the spelling of my first name because it was spelled a little bit differently. And I knew I was going to be writing and broadcasting and become sort of a public figure. So the way it was spelled before, it was associated with when you would Google it, you could see a lot of naked ladies. So
oh wow,
I
okay.
had changed the spelling of my first name just to get rid of that problem. Yeah, because my picture would pop up with like half, with the dozens of half-dressed ladies, and I was like,
Right,
no, I
right.
can't have
Yeah,
that.
I understand. You wanted to kind of distance yourself from that. But listen, in the
But it's
last
the same pronunciation, and I adopted that from Arabic. In Arabic, you can the sound is one thing, and then if you're spelling it in English, you can spell it, half a dozen different ways, as long
right.
as the sound is the same. So I was like, okay.
No, that's cool. I just was throwing it out there. But okay, so we only have a couple of minutes left. I have dropped the link to the article on Israel Friend or Foe into the chat room. I think I did it twice. If there's anything else you want to point people to out there, or if you want to suggest how they can find other work you're doing, besides, of course, Middle East Rising is a website on its way and getting out there. But other stuff you might want to bring up, go right ahead.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah. Yeah, I was saying if you want to point people to anything else on the internet or whatever,
Oh,
you know,
oh, okay, yeah.
because we
Okay, well, I do have. I'm going to start a fundraiser. I put together when I was in the West Bank. I saw that I was in a region that is producing the finest olive oil in the world. I was studying the olive oil too, the quality, and I saw that more than half of the farmers, and the majority of the farmers, cannot sell their olive harvest. They still take care of the land and they still pick the olives, and they'll just, even though they prefer to give the olive oil away, but oftentimes there's just a lack of buyers and they can't, so they end up selling the olive oil below the market value, and there's a lot of poverty there. So I created something called Jerusalem's Gold, which is it's an export, olive oil export from the West Bank. What I'm intending to do is to open a new market for the Palestinian olive oil internationally.
mm,
And this should help all of Palestine, hopefully, inshallah, as we say. Um, and so the website is Jerusalem's Gold. You can Google that. It's www.jerusalems-gold.com. And there is an S on Jerusalem's. So I'll be starting a fundraising campaign, crowdsourcing. So you can actually have a chance to take part as an investor. Um, what else? The Liberty Beacon Project. That has been an incredible outlet for me. Roger Landry, the founder of the Liberty Beacon, has been like a pillar. He invited me to write articles while I was still in Jordan, and I didn't think I really was a good writer for about a year. But recently my confidence has gone up as I've tackled some pretty good projects and
right. So
like yeah.
So Ariana Lubb, you can find her all throughout the Liberty Beacon, all one word.com. Also, some of her articles have been published at thefallingdarkness.com. She's talking about the olives and the olive trees over there actually create some really good wood and things. I've actually had things made from the olive trees, from
It's
places like
beautiful wood.
Bethlehem. It's beautiful wood. Some of the craftsmen that have come out of Palestine really do some really excellent stuff, and I know that's got nothing to do with you, but it's just my personal
I
commentary.
would love to promote handcrafts,
Ab-
later after
right.
Jerusalem's Gold gets going. Yeah.
Right. So I want to thank everybody who decided to tune in. I know that my bumper music is just about to kick in and will be all done, but I want to thank everybody for tuning into the Ochelli Effect tonight at ucy.tv/TOE. And Ariana Love was my second hour guest. In the first hour, we had Roger Stanford. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Have a good one.